All right, welcome back, subscribers. Today we're actually going to be working on this 2017 WRX. It has got the FA20 model. If you are looking for the installation of the STI, that is going to be a different video and different install, just for the sheer fact that it is a different engine. They have the EJ257 engine versus this has the FA20 turbocharged engine. So over here, we're going to be doing the IAG AOS installation. AOS is the air to oil separator. This is the street kit, and it is only for the 2017 to 2020 WRX models. Now, the 2015 and 2016 differences, I believe, are just the fittings. And if I'm not correct, somebody can correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure it's just the fittings and the fitting sizes that are allotted for that year. So with that said, we're going to go ahead with the actual installation itself without talking too much. I have gone through a lot of the YouTube videos and uploads, and I have a broad idea of why people are skipping so many steps. I understand this is a very tight engine. I understand the process itself is actually very difficult, and it does take a long time. Now, expect yourself to take at least 5 hours to install this, and I have seen people take up to 8 hours to install, depending on their knowledge and skill level. So yes, there is a lot underneath the hood, but it all does not need to be removed. There will be processes that will be needed to be done, but I'm going to explain them as best as possible, and I'm going to try and give you guys as best as possible proper lighting as well, so that you guys can understand the location. I feel a lot of people were skipping into the next chapter, and basically they would start here explaining the process, and then the next shot would be like right here. Let me turn the light on. And so now we're going to move on to the next bolt, and we're going to do this. I'm like, what are we looking at? I don't understand. What are we looking at? So where's the location of this? And that's what a lot of these videos are doing. So I'm generally going to pan back and then come into the location of where we are working in this video, just to give you a more broader understanding of the actual installation itself. All right, so first things first, what I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the battery, just for the sheer fact that we are going to be messing with some harnesses and an actual computer module itself. So because of that, we're going to have to lower a few things in order to be able to put the actual AOS in that location where the computer is. So in order to do so, we want to make sure that we're not having any proper or improper surges that actually accumulate any kind of problem later down the road. So with that said, we're going to get the battery out, and then we're going to go ahead and take out everything out of this box. We're going to display it all across the table, and then I'm going to explain the actual process of what is needed in order to get into the actual AOS installation. All right, so with the battery out, we're going to move to the next step. We're going to move on to the actual intake assembly itself. We need to get that out, so we are going to remove the actual plastic pins or the plastic clips that are located here, and then we're going to move on to the actual air box itself. Normally, there would be a stock air box and a valve cover, which is very easily removed, so we're going to go ahead and do that process now. During the entirety of this process, each individual process will be labeled and bagged. This is going to help you tremendously with the entire installation process later. So on to the next process will be the removal of this electric fan. We're going to have to take out the two 10mm hardware that are located at the top, and then on to the next step of actually removing that plug right there, which is actually the power supply to the electric fan itself. So we'll go ahead and reach down and do that. So that's unplugged, and now we'll go ahead and remove the two 10mm hardware. So after the fan removal, we're going to go ahead and remove the charge pipe here. It just rests on this shelf here with a rubber grommet. It's able to just be able to pop that off. But first, we're going to have to loosen the hose clamp that attaches it to the top mount intercooler itself. And then you're going to need an extension so that you can access the hardware. There's going to be one 12mm bolt on each side of the actual charge pipe itself. You can see it on both sides. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is grab the extension, and I'll take that out so that that can be removed. But it's not able to be pulled out completely because the blow-off valve is still attached to the actual intake pipe itself. So in order to disconnect the blow-off valve that is hidden behind this vent tube, we're going to have to unplug this vent tube here with this white connector. All right, so I've gone ahead and put it up on jack stands just for the sheer fact that we are going to remove the plastic cover on the bottom of the engine. This is going to be a lot easier access to be able to get your hands into that tight fitment. It's just proving to be a lot harder than I want it to be able to unplug that white plug right now. So it's a lot easier when you just detach that cover that's literally right underneath it. So once we remove the bottom engine cover, it's actually extremely easy. It's only going to consist of a few 12mm and some plastic clips, which are then utilized into the bag and labeled later on so that that can be set to the side. Then you actually want to get underneath the car, and you don't necessarily have to do this step, but it's just going to make things a lot easier to get out of your way. There's this aluminum H-brace that's actually right here. It's just going to be connected with the four 12mm hardware that actually extend all the way around. It's really relatively easy to just get that out of the way so that you can get in here and unplug everything that needs to be done. So now that that H-beam and the bottom protective plate has been removed, we can actually get up and underneath to the turbo assembly very easily now. So now we're going to go ahead and unplug this. That gets unplugged, and you can now see the clamp directly behind that attaches the blow-off valve to the intake on the turbo. So that needs to be disconnected so now that we can pull the charge pipe itself. Okay, so once I've got everything unplugged, you just move this off out of the way. You're going to grab this one vacuum line. You're going to move that off, and you're going to want to disconnect the blow-off valve, that vacuum line also as well. Getting caught. So once you disconnect the blow-off valve and this vacuum line from the inlet to the turbo inlet off the turbo, you are able to pull this charge pipe assembly out now. So now we're going to go ahead and generate to the top of the car. So with the charge pipe now disconnected because the clamp itself has been loosened, as you can see, we can go ahead and disconnect it from the top mount and then slip it off of the shelf and then slip it off of the turbo. Just want to twist it off a little bit so you can actually make some clearance for the blow-off valve. And then it's very important that inside there's a rubber gasket on the inside here of your charge pipe. You want to make sure that that stays in there. If it does fall out, just go ahead and place it right back in. So on to the next step now will be the removal of the top mount intercooler. So you're going to go ahead and disconnect the hose clamp here so that goes and feeds into the actual intake manifold itself. And then you're going to go ahead and move on to the top mount intercooler bracket, which is connected with the three 12mm hardware. And then you're going to run around to the other side and take out the last remaining 12mm, which is here. Okay, so once that top mount is actually removed, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go right back to that plastic plug that gave us problems earlier. So now we're actually going to remove this white plastic plug out of this vent tube that goes to the crankcase. So it's got a locking clamp on it. So with a screwdriver, we're going to go ahead and unlock it. And I'll go ahead and show you how to do that now. So you just want to get it on the back side, just apply some pressure and just gently massage it, and it'll come right off of the tooth here. So what it is this recessed area here is actually where it catches here on that tooth. All right, so you just peel this clamp off. We'll get that up and out of the way, and then you're gonna wanna take this white vent tube. Oh, it's being stubborn. There it goes. All right, and then you're gonna want to place it. See how it was placed in here? We're gonna have to place it back into the inlet boot down here, and then make sure that it does clamp back into place. Actually, before we do so, we wanna make sure that the plug is back onto the metal tab that it's supposed to be on that holds it. Snapped in, and then we're going to go ahead and place this back into the vent tube here, and then make sure that it still plugs into the electrical as well. And then you heard the click. Everything seems to be seated correctly. On to the next step. So now the next step will be the removal of the EGR pipe, which is located on the backside of the engine, right above the transmission area. So I'm going to go ahead and snake in here real quick and give you a better idea. Now, this pipe here is your EGR pipe. It's going to be connected with two 12 millimeters here, one there, and then you follow that pipe, and you're going to see there's one here, and then there's one that is actually directly underneath it, right where my finger is. You can see it, it's right there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take that EGR pipe off. Okay, so with the EGR pipe removed, we can now access this hose here. Now, this is your PCV hose. We're going to go ahead and remove that and pull that up and off. You can see the fitting that actually screws into the engine block itself. We're going to have to remove that also as well. That's a 19 millimeter, so we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so I went ahead and removed that fitting. That's what it looks like. As you can see, it does have a check valve on the inside, so we're looking for more improved flow. So we're gonna go ahead and go to the bag that they provide. Inside is the fitting that is much larger diameter. It already has the Teflon tape already on it, so we're gonna insert that into the block at 15 foot per pound. And then after that, we're gonna go ahead and grab this 90-degree elbow. We're gonna slip that into the PCV hose that we pulled off of this old fitting. Pretty easy. Okay, so I've got the fitting in the block. I've got it all thread in, hand tight as much as I can. Now it's actually time to torque it in. It is at 15 pounds per foot, and the torque wrenches that I have do not go down that far. The only ones that I do have are the inch per pound, and you're going to want to be able to convert that. That is going to be a 180 inch per pound, which will be a conversion of 15 foot per pound. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and torque this into place and then move on to putting the 90-degree elbow into the PCV hose. Okay, everything's torqued in place, and I went ahead and just placed the 90-degree elbow right into the PCV hose, which normally would have just plugged right into the older fitting. So now on to the next step. Okay, so we're going to kick back now over here to this corner where the computer is, and we're going to remove these plastic tabs and move this out of the way. If you squeeze the plastic tab underneath, you can see that then you can bring this harness right up and off of this metal bracket here, and then after that we're going to move on to the 10 millimeters that surround it so that we can remove it. What we're trying to do, basically in this instance, is relocate a few things so that we can fit the AOS in this area.
All right, so underneath, you just want to reach underneath, grab that plastic tab, and just give it a good squeeze, and it should simply come through. It can be a pain in the butt sometimes. There we go. Got that one. Got the other side. This one as well. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to this one here. We'll just squeeze the tabs. And then this one will pop through.
Okay, so now you want to take the 10 millimeter that's right here that attaches the computer to the actual bracket itself, and then there's actually one located directly underneath it. So in order to access that and get a good camera angle, I've got Tyler sitting down on the bottom of the car, so I'm going to hand him the camera, and then you can see what the actual bottom of the computer looks like. And I'll go ahead and I'll tap on that 10 millimeter. And as you can see right here, that's where that 10 millimeter is located. Now it's very easily reached and put in a socket on it for removal. So it's not that hard. I just can't get to it with a camera. So this is the best way for you to be able to see its location. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull that off of the two studs. I'll pull this up, we'll get that out of the way. And then right inside of here, there's a 10 millimeter that actually holds that bracket. And then down on the frame rail itself, you can actually see it right there. The rusty one, that's the one that needs to be removed. Okay, so I crawled underneath the car directly where the computer is that we placed, and Tyler is now removing that bracket now with the two 10 millimeters. So I might as well emphasize on the next step, which is actually, you see that ground that bolts into the side rail with that 10 millimeter. Underneath it is a plastic plug. That's just a filler plug that you're just gonna pull out of that hole. That is a threaded hole. So now we're going to move that grounded harness down to that new position. So I'm going to reach up in here and I'm going to pry that plastic plug out. That's it. It's that simple. That's a threaded hole from the factory. I'm just going to reach up in here with the ratchet now and lower this harness down to that other hole right below it. Okay, so with that 10 millimeter removed, and Tyler has gone ahead and removed the other two 10 millimeters, while I'm under here, I can go ahead and assist him on the last final clip that attaches the wiring harness to the ECU bracket, which is this plastic plug right here. Let me give that a squeeze. Go ahead and pull that harness, Tyler. And that's it. Popped right out. Alright, so now I am ready to move that harness to the bottom hole, but it's actually not going to reach. If you try pulling on it, it won't access that bottom section because it's actually still attached up on top with a plastic clip. So we're going to go ahead and move back to the top, remove that clip, and then we can actually have the access in the room that we need with that harness to put it in this new location. With the bracket removed, you can see that plastic clip right here. That's going to have to be removed and pulled up and off. That's because that is where, or what is holding that ground harness. You can see right there, and that's why we don't have the extra room to put it in its new location. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pop this right out of this hole. And back underneath the car, now we have proper slack that has been removed. And that can now be come down and relocated now to its new position. Okay, so back underneath the car, putting this in its new location. Make sure everything's snug and tight so you have proper grounding. Okay, now back up to the top to the next step, we're going to go ahead and remove the harness from the ECU itself, and we're going to take this bracket off now and remove that. It is got a plastic clip just like before, so we're going to have to remove that plastic clip out of the bracket also as well. So first we'll start off with that 10 millimeter. Okay, so now it's time to install the bracket. Now, if you remember correctly, you remember that rusty bolt that we had to remove earlier for the bottom of the computer bracket that placed right on the top of the frame rail down there, that 10 millimeter, well, that's going to be where this 90-degree leaf is going to live. That's where that goes down, and as you can see, this leaf here that my index finger is pointing at, that's going to go down to the old location of where that ground harness that we just moved to, down lower. So now where that hole is free, we're now going to put the 10 mil in through this hole. So now that bracket will sit on top of the frame. We'll go ahead and slip that down in there. All right, so with the bracket sitting in place and the leaf that extends down to the old harness hole, we're able to insert hardware now. Now, the two 10 millimeter bolts that you're going to use for that bracket will be the two 10 mils that you pulled out for the old bracket to hold the ECU to the side of the wall, which was inserted here and one on the frame rail. So you'll insert the one back in the frame rail, and then you'll get underneath the car and insert the one into the old harness hole. All right, so directly underneath, you can see how the bracket extends down to where that hole is. So we're going to go ahead and put that 10 mil right into where the old harness used to be. All right, I've secured the 10 millimeter hardware on the side of the bracket, on the side of the frame in the old ground harness location. And Tyler is working on the other 10 millimeter that's directly on top of the frame rail, and that will put the bracket in its stationary position, and we'll be able to move on to the next step. All right, so Tyler went ahead and snugged that up, so now the bracket is completely stationary and rigid, and we're going to go ahead and move to the next step, which is relocating the ECU now to this new bracket. All right, so now the next step is to slide this computer down to the bracket holes and location. It basically will line itself right up right there. And they actually have provided new hardware with the kit, which is in with that bag of fittings that we showed earlier. So here's the two 10 millimeters that you're going to need. And then earlier when we removed the computer, we had the two 10 millimeters. That's actually the two 10 millimeter nuts. These are what you're going to use now to fasten the hardware. So now we're going to use that to fasten this computer right to the bracket itself. And then you remember on the bottom how it had the 10 millimeter we had to crawl underneath for. Well, we're just going to reach through and do the same thing underneath. Slide that 10 millimeter through the bracket, and then here on the back side, we'll attach the 10 millimeter on the back side of the hardware. All right, so all the hardware has been slipped in and tightened down to the new bracket in its new location, and we're going to go ahead and start moving on to the next step, which is actually the installation of the AOS itself. All right, so we're going to go ahead and install the coolant lines first with the supplied hoses that they've already given. This is the first coolant line. You're going to have two of them. There's going to be a short one and a long one. This is your short one. You can tell right off which ones they are just by the high pressure ends here with the metal shrouds. And also, these are the only two ones that have the proper fittings that will fit in the allotted areas. So the short hose actually goes on the bottom here. So we're going to go ahead and put that in there. We'll screw this in just by hand, and then we'll go ahead and tighten that in with a 7/8 inch wrench. Get that nice and snug, and then followed by the top hose also as well, which is the longer one, which will be fed in by hand and then snug tight. Okay, so now that we've got the lines on hand tight, we have the inability of being able to tighten them because they actually hit the bottom breather. So we're going to go ahead and remove that with the 3 Allen keys that hold it on. They are a 4mm Allen key, so we're going to go ahead and do that as the next step. All right. Okay, so now that that's actually tightened, now we're going to go ahead and install the breather back on. The main importance here is you want to install that. So what they do is they've actually got them all slotted for different fitments. For this model, you're going to want to be able to clock it in the same orientation as the hose is fashioned here. So everything is all coming out in the same direction, mainly just for the 16s and up to the 2020s. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and we'll take our 4mm Allen and we'll tighten this into place. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the PCV hose, which will tap into your bottom of your breather here. And then your PCV hose that's provided here, this is the other one that has the AN line. And then that'll go in here. We'll hand thread that in there, and then we'll go ahead and torque that into place once we get the Allen keys snugged up. All right, so I just want to explain this real fast. I'm just going to pull this out and give you guys a rough idea. I should have showed you earlier. You can see the O-ring that's on here. You do not need to apply Teflon tape to these actual coolant lines themselves for the upper and lower, just for the sheer fact that it does have that, so that it will seat and it will not be able to leak. Now for the actual PVC, or excuse me, the PCV extension here, you're going to have to put some Teflon tape on here just to ensure that that doesn't leak on you. All right, so a nice little trick is you stare inside of the actual fitting itself so it looks like a clock. You don't see a clock when you see it like this, but you see it when it looks like this. And then you actually wrap the Teflon tape in a clockwise fashion, so then you can tear it off, and the flap then basically doesn't bind up when you are threading it into the actual breather itself. Okay, so now that everything has been tightened up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move to the actual mounting bracket for the backside. And we're going to count up 3 holes, 1, 2, 3, and that's where the bottom hole is going to be placed. The hardware is provided in one of these bags. These little Allen keys right here. That is a 5mm Allen key, so we're going to go ahead and start threading those in and getting that mounted. All right, so with these 3 tightened up and in place, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step. All right, so now next we're going to go ahead and get in here and start making some room for the AOS. Now, you've actually got this harness that is literally free floating here, and it's, you want to make that safe. So we're going to extend that down towards the frame rail, and we're going to zip tie it into place so that it's actually stationary and we don't have to worry about it. Mainly for the sheer fact that the AOS is going to live in this area. Also, this bracket here, it's kind of a pain in the butt. It tends to hold this harness here, and this is where the clip that we removed earlier so that we could give the desired room and space for us to work. So now it's actually time to remove this bracket itself, which consists of 2 10mm nuts right there. So we're going to go ahead and take those off and get everything basically clearance for the actual AOS. Now, don't worry about zip ties because they do provide them, and they actually give you an overabundant amount. So we're going to go ahead and grab a couple of those and start zip tying the actual harness into place. So when we're in here doing the harness, after you remove that bracket, you want to be able to unplug this computer from its new location, because if you don't do that, let's say it's still plugged in. Let's go ahead and put that back on there. You can't push this down any further. So if you unplug this, push it through the loop, and then you can actually push this down much, much further and still plug this right back in. And then you can take this loop here and you want to zip tie it right here, and that will actually be a wall that will hold that there, such as so. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to grab some zip ties, and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, so you can see way down there, I've got a couple zip ties holding it stationary into place. It's basically out of the way. I've tucked the harness down to the actual rail as far as it can go. And then now I'm gonna go ahead to the next step, which is manipulating these brake lines so that I can bolt the actual AOS to the side of this tower. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna stress this brake line, kind of pull it up and over the actual stress tower, the strut tower, excuse me. See how it's up and over that corner? And we're gonna do the same thing on that bottom brake line. Just kind of pull it right up and over. And you see how that exposes that hardware there? So now we can bolt up against that. It should be nice and flush, should give us some nice clearance. Gonna give us a little bit more manipulation, and then we should be able to get the AOS actually bolted to the side of the strut tower. Okay, so now that I have manipulated the brake lines themselves up and over the strut tower bar, now we should have enough room to be able to slide the AOS in here. So let's go ahead and mount that up now. Okay, so they've already provided the two 10 mils that come in the bag. So we're gonna go ahead and start throwing those into the side of the strut tower itself, and then get this tightened up. Hey, what's up, guys? Well, I'm going to explain something real quick. Had a little bit of a debacle right now, and we're basically having an issue with the installation, wondering what was going on, and we've come to the realization that there was an entire section of hose missing from the brand new IAG kit. It happens. You know, it's something that they slap these things together and throw them in the box. I'm sure it's a pretty quick assembly line. So I reached out and I got the hose that was needed. The one that was actually missing is this one here. This is the PCV hose. So we basically just couldn't do that that interaction between doing the installation of it. With that said, I reached out. I got it the next day, 10 a.m. Which they said they would overnight it for me, so which worked out really good. So now we're in the position that we are now. So I've got it. We're ready to do the finishing of the install. I basically kind of had to just put a stop at the upload itself. So if you see me wearing different clothes, that's the reason for the wardrobe change, is because it actually turned into a 2-day installation when in fact we should have got this done, yesterday. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and move on to the installation process. But right now, I'm just going to go ahead and explain to you the orientation of all these hoses. That was the main reason how we discovered basically that something was missing. So let me show you where everything goes. It makes this a lot easier. You're not having to pan through the entire book. You're not having to find the process and whatnot. And you can skip to this point in the video and actually see the orientation. A lot of guys are mechanically inclined, and if you just tell us where that hose goes, we'll just get it done, So you can turn this 5-hour install into probably about a 2 or 3 hour install if you just understood where the hoses go. Not a single upload on YouTube has this option, and it's annoying. I don't care to watch you to put this entire process together in your half-hour to 45-minute long upload. Now, if you want to continue to watch me do this because I'm explaining it better than others or I have better lighting, awesome. If you like the video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so you get the notification so that you know that I'm going to be informative for you on the next upload. Always will, always, always will. So with that said, let's go ahead and show you the orientation of the actual AOS and where all these hoses go. All right, so this is a 2017 to 2020 kit, only for the FA20 WRX only. So obviously, if you've jumped here to this position, you just basically want to see the orientation. You're like me, you wanted to see how it's all set up without having to flip through the 40 pages that are provided. And that's, to me, I feel like that's why this install just takes way too long, is the instructions. This is 2020. I would like to see a video. Let's just be frank here. I only want to watch a 20-minute video or so at most and be done with this and just go get the car done. So this being my first 2017 to 2020 AOS install, it was a learning curve, and I had to read that freaking book and learn and make this process much easier for all the viewers that are watching now. This is going to be your orientation. This is where all the hoses go. I will pan back a little bit so you get a broader idea of where everything is going to be. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the orientation of these hoses and the mounting of the OES. Now, this process takes anywhere between 5 and 8 hours depending on, your skill level. So with that said, if you are mechanically inclined, you can probably cut this process down to anywhere between 2 and 3 hours because of power tools and knowledge of the engine itself. So now we're going to go ahead and start explaining how to put this thing together in the orientation that it is in. If you start with the mounting tabs, you can grab the bracket. It orients down. This is the top. The breather is the top of the AOS. You can see the breather. It's got the 3 ports versus on the bottom, it only has 2. You come over here to where the mounting holes are. They're already threaded. Count up 1, 2, 3. Right here on the 3rd hole is where you're going to start that bottom bolt for that bracket. And then you go ahead and fasten that on. And then you're going to fish in all of your coolant lines. Now the longer coolant line, you can see this long one here. That's going to be the top. That goes on the top. And then here on the bottom that has this fitting here, that's the small one. That's going to go on the small and thread right into the bottom here. Now they have rubber O-rings on the inside, so they actually seat really well. You don't have to go the extra mile to Teflon tape them, so it's actually not too bad. They'll thread right in and seat. There is 7/8 inch wrench. Okay, so then once you tighten up that AN line, then you can put your breather back on with the 3 Allen keys. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and show you where those coolant lines go and how they're fashioned on. But first, I'm going to explain real quick the process to get it to where you can install it onto the side of the strut tower. Here's going to be the new location for the strut tower. Normally, there would be a computer here, but in the process of moving it down there, in order to see the process and the entirety of the installation, you are going to have to go back and watch the process of this video. I'm sorry, I can't explain everything quickly because a lot of stuff is going to be basically labor intensive. I really should just tell you that this is not an easy process. It's going to take a little bit of time, but if you know the orientation of that, you can speed up a ton of time. And this is why I'm doing this right now. I'm basically giving you guys the cheat sheet, because I feel like YouTube should have a cheat sheet for a lot of these installation videos, and they don't. I would like to see what it looks like beforehand so I can just go do it. I don't need to listen. So again, without talking your head off, let's say it's mounted there. All right. Now the orientation of the AOS sitting there, strut tower, just like this. All right. You guys are with me, right? Okay. Real quick. We're going to run down here to the turbo assembly. Once everything's been removed, in order to remove everything and make room for yourself, there's an electric fan here. There's a 10 mil here. There's a plastic plug on the bottom that gives you your power. You're going to unplug that. That thing comes right out. You're going to remove your charge pipe. That comes right out. You're going to remove your intake. That comes right out. You're going to remove the top mount intercooler. You're getting the idea of how we got here in the justification. So what we're going to do now is move on to the lines themselves. This is the line you're going to want. See how it's got the spring clamp on here? You're going to want to pinch this line because there's coolant in there. Obviously, we're doing this because we don't want to have a coolant loss. We're wanting to keep it minimal, all right? So in this area, when you are standing over the passenger side and you come into the engine bay, you're going to be looking back here. Now, obviously, we are skipping a lot of processes to get to this. We're just showing the orientation of the AOS itself. So when you're looking at all of these hoses, don't be distraught when you're looking at the IAG instructions. They are hard to understand which hose they are talking about. Now, in order to actually see which one you need to pinch off back here, you need to move this one, you need to move this one, and that's the one down there. It is next to this pipe here, okay? That hard pipe. It sits right next to it. You can see the spring clamp on there that it's attached to. So you see how it has a 90-degree elbows down to it. And then that hard line fitting goes through the block. And then it comes out through the front You can see the fitting, or fittings, excuse me. Here's your hose. This is where it pinches off. So you're going to pinch this, pinch that hose. That is going to keep the minimal loss of coolant, all right? So once we do so, this spring clamp comes off. You can take this hose, and it comes around, and it's going to plug right in to the bottom hose. Right here is your fitting. There it is. So that goes into the bottom. Now the top line, that long hose, that gets to take the place. That goes right in to where you just pulled it off. Easy peasy. That way it has the proper circulation to the AOS. Everything is getting circulated, and that's how that is done. So that already in itself is 2 lines already installed. All right, so without talking your head off, let's try and do this quick. All right, so with the coolant lines done, that one, and there's that one. All right, so now you've got this breather tube. You're probably wondering, what is this? This right here is going to be the breather. All right, and this goes down to the turbo assembly also as well. So you see the white clip here? This is connected to this hose, which would normally have a locking clamp on it. Once you break the locking clamp, which you're going to have to unplug that white plug, the best way to do so is put this thing on jack stands. Don't work hard and kill your back. It's ridiculous. Underneath is just a plastic cover. Take that off real quick. There's a little aluminum H-beam. Remove it, and then look at that. The whole assembly is right there. So most of these install videos, they're all staring over the engine bay to work and do that. That's ridiculous. Work smarter, not harder. So I'm literally giving you the cheat sheet right now. All right, so we're going to go ahead and let's say that was off. We broke the clamp off. You can see I already broke the clamp off. You plug the plug back into where it was, all right? We need that because that is a powered plug. You can see the power wire that goes to it. Make sure you hear the snap. It snaps into place. This now comes off. This is your breather tube, guys, okay? You can see the breather tube. Here's your breather, all right? We're going to take that breather tube, and we're now going to snake it down here by the rails, okay? That comes around. And you can see how it kind of wants to do like this 90 thing here. There's a reason for that. That's because it wants to 90. Oh, come on, move out of the way. It wants to 90 into that. All right, so this is your 90. This is that hose that's provided. It goes on the 3 ports. It's that bottom port right here on the 3rd port. That is this little hose here, and it's got the 90 in it. These are all going to be pre-made for you, all right? So that is your 90, all right? So we've already done your coolant line, your top coolant line. Remember, the top coolant line is going to go down to the turbo and plug in there, okay? The bottom coolant line will then plug into the OEM coolant line. You're just going to take that and plug it right in. That's now circulative. All right, this breather hose that we took off of that now gets circulated, plugged into the 90 hose, the little one here, all right, which goes into the 3 port. That's plugged into there, all right. This breather tube that has the long Y, you see the long Y, and it Ys down, it's really long. That's now going to take its place. You guys still with me? I know I'm trying to talk quick and I'm trying to do it as best as possible. That will now go there. That snaps on there. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, so now that's 4 lines real quick. All right, so now we're going to go to what they also supply in the kit, which is a larger AN fitting. This fitting here, excuse me, this pressure fitting here that actually goes into the crankcase, which is located, which you're going to have to remove the EGR pipe just to be able to get in here. But normally, this is the hose here that would have been plugged into this OEM fitting, which you have to remove. They give you a larger fitting in the kit. You take it out, put this one in there, put some Teflon tape on it so you don't have any issues, and you put it at 30 foot per pound. If you do not have a torque wrench that goes down that far, you can use an inch per pound, and 180 inches per pound is the accumulative of 30 pound per foot. So put it on 180 inches, put it to torque spec, and you're done. Next step.
That PCV hose right here, that normally vent hose that would go on this OEM fitting no longer will go on there. So now they provide this 90 degree. You put that in there. Obviously, you're getting the connection here. We're about to go to a different hose. So now, what does this PCV vent tube go to? Because it won't fit on that big boy down there. So now they provide the area for it to go to, which is the breather, because PCV crank breather on the engine. Breather. Here's your breather tube. It's got this connection here. We're now going to tap into the breather. Same size hose. That taps into here. That's right here. That's another AN fitting, so don't be confused when you get this in the kit. Everything's going to be pre-made, but it's a smaller AN than the water line. So, I mean, you put this in there, it's going to be like, you know, throwing a hot dog down a hallway. So, with that said, you got to cap this third port here. Put that on there, put some zip ties. I don't have zip ties here, guys, because I still have to do the orientation of installation after this. I just want to show you where everything goes. So remember, we've already done the coolant lines. I showed you where those goes. I show you right here is your breather. You know, so now we have one hose left. That's it. Everything here is all been hooked up. This is the hose that was missing. This is the Y section. So I had to wait for this, and that, you know, obviously having it missing, I couldn't explain this, and that's how we found that this was missing. So now that we have it, this is the PCV. That fitting, that huge fitting that I just showed you we changed out, that's why they have it wide in, so it can accept a larger port. All right, so now this gets plugged in there. You see the 90? We're gonna come over here to the engine bay. This bracket here sits on your bell housing. I'm going to give you a little pro tip, okay? Now that this has already been plugged in and you're wondering what's left, the last hose, that 90, move this up here. This goes like this and you'll be oriented just like that. All right, so that 90 will come over this hoop where this is notched out on this bracket, and it will 90 down into that fitting there. Real easy. Put a zip tie on there, clamp it, whatever your fashion is. Zip tie is all you're going to need, which, by the way, guys, they provide all the zip ties in the kit. Next fashion, off of that Y, you see that one Y goes this way and one Y goes that way. One of the sections, which is we'll say the right side, okay? So if we're looking at it like this, and the fitting is in this 90, this Y, we'll say this is the right side, goes into the middle port. So now everything has been shown now, guys. The middle port has been taken by that Y, your PCV Y, which is the right side. All right, now this other one goes down to the bottom to finish up the installation of the AOS. This hose here has a significant installation method, I should say. So what you're going to do, here's your pro tip that I want to tell you guys. Take the bracket off. It's going to make things so much easier. 212 millimeters, because that left side hose needs to get fished through that tiny little hole right there and then bolted to the bottom of the AOS or slid onto the bottom port. It's going to be tight quarters. Make it easy for yourself. Take the bracket off. It's free floating at that point in time. Once it's installed, you just tighten the bolts down. Nice little pro tip for you. So guys, that is the entire installation. That is the entire orientation. This process is made out to be so much harder than what it is. And it is. You know why it's conveyed to be hard? I'm going to show you. This is what they give you. Step by step. I don't know about you, but I'm a millennial. I'm an old millennial, but I'm a millennial. I was raised with technology. This is what we're given in 2020? What are we doing? So, reading paragraphs and whatnot, we don't even do this in school now. We don't even do this for our kids. We don't. They have laptops. They have their own Chromebooks. They have their own tablets. Books? What are books? So understand that this is going to take you a ton of time reading and understanding the process, the orientation of where these parts are. Let's say, let's just say you're not mechanically inclined and you want to do this to save $1, to save $1 from having to pay, someone such as myself to do this for you. You can do this on your own. You can. And they do color-coded pictures. They do a really good job of circulating, the orientation of all the hardware and explaining everything to the T to their best ability. They do. But understand that if you read this from page to page and process to process, there's no way you're doing this in 5 hours. No way. At the 5-hour point, or the 4-hour point, the AOS was ready to be installed to the side of the strut tower. That was 4 hours in. And I'll tell you right now, I didn't start doing this yesterday. So I'm probably going to come off as super passionate, especially conveying that. That took about, 10 and a half minutes to explain something that is going to take you all day to do. I really hope that just skipping to this part, I'm going to have it in the comments section so you can just come to this upload. When you buy your AOS, you go to the comments section and you just click on the highlighted time. You come right to the time in the video, click on it, it'll bring you right to the link, right to that position of me explaining everything on this AOS. It'll make you, it'll speed up time for you. I mean, that's really a big thing. Time, we don't want to spend a bunch of time on this stuff. I mean, obviously, I did skip a lot of steps to get it up to that, and you're going to have to watch a lot of the video, and I suggest you watch the whole thing, honestly, if you want it to be done the correct manner. Now, instead of having to fight processes, because there's a lot of things that I didn't talk about, especially clearing, let me turn on the light here so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Like actually putting some clearance here on the brake lines and whatnot. You have to manipulate those, and there's things that you have to do, such as moving the computer, etc. There's steps that I didn't talk about on that, on the quick talk, basically. So I hope it helped you. We're going to go ahead and start the installation where we left off. Now we can actually mount the AOS to the strut tower and put this in the correct manner. I'm going to go ahead and basically explain it in the same manner. Everything's going to be detailed as best as possible so that you guys still understand the process. I mean, that's really what we want and the reason why we watch these YouTube videos. And I'm going to stop talking because I know that's even annoying for me, and I'm a YouTuber. So now the next step is the actual Y section. Now remember, all of these are going to be pre-cut for you. It makes it a lot easier. So this is actually the section that we were missing. So that's basically why we had to stop. We're going to go ahead and move into the next orientation of installation. This is your PCB, and with it actually 90 and down to the actual port. Now, earlier we discussed that we had to change out that fitting, that pressure fitting for your crankcase vent. Well, this obviously is not going to fit. So this gets utilized over here. And earlier I was talking about how it goes through here. As you can see, it won't fit through the notched area. So this hose on this side will have to get fed through this bracket here in order for this to be mated to the fitting down on the crankcase. All right, so what we're gonna do is remove that bracket. Just gonna, nice little pro tip. It's going to help you a lot, to just basically cut off time and whatnot. And then you also know that the orientation has to go to the bottom of the AOS. In the the IAG installation, in the instructions, they want you to mount the actual AOS now before you even start going to this. Now, it's a lot easier to mount a lower hose when the unit is basically free floating and put it on, secure it, and then just put the two mounting hardware on there, rather than having to, I got a step stool so it makes it easier for me, but imagine having to do this and fit that hose on that bottom port of the AOS. You can't really see what you're doing. So let's say you actually get it on there. Now you gotta zip tie it. Holy cow, that's not gonna be an easy process. So what you're gonna wanna do is take that bracket off, slide it through the fitting, or slide it, right through the hole. Get it all prepared. Put it on the AOS, zip tie it to the AOS, get everything ready, zip tie this section to the AOS, and everything is just a drop-in unit. It's Pretty easy. The hose can free float and sit there while you put the two 10 mils into the side of the strut tower. Simple. That's not how it's explained in the instruction book. So if you're watching this, I just cut a lot of time off for you. Okay, so right here on the back, you can see Tyler already took the two hardware out. By the way, earlier I said that they were 12 millimeters. They're actually 14 millimeters. So right here on the back side, you're going to see how the metal flange comes into the harness here. What you're going to want to do is sandwiched in between, see this clip, that little tooth here, and the metal itself. You want to just push the flat edge in there, and that's all you have to do. And then you can push out. All right, so you're going to want to take the bracket and grab your hose here. Remember the left side, because that's the way it's going to be plugged into the crankcase port. Shove this through.
It's tight. It fits.
Okay, and this is a lot easier. And you can see, you can still put the hardware on, no problem. You know, you can bolt that right into place after. So now we're gonna go ahead, put that right on the AOS. All right, so this is gonna go right in the middle of the 3 ports. Now, earlier I explained how to do this process. I just went ahead and left the actual pressure cap on there so we can cap that off. We're gonna go ahead and run the zip tie on that, same as well as this. And then on the left-hand side, we're gonna get underneath and insert the bottom section here. Okay, and then what you wanna do is you wanna basically hold it in the oriented fashion that it's supposed to be mounted and twist all your hoses up so that they will spin where they need to be, and they're not binding and twisting on you. You really don't want any pressure on your hose. It will actually speed up how fast it deteriorates, believe it or not. So that's what we're gonna go ahead, and that looks like it is a perfect orientation, you know, simulating how it would be mounted on that crankcase port there. Now this one probably could come just a little bit more level. And that's it. That's the money shot. So now this is ready to be mounted after we put some zip ties on. All right, so a little tip I should tell you about securing these. All right, now this is pulled literally as tight as I can possibly get it. Now, even though it's as tight as you can physically possibly pull it, doesn't necessarily mean that it's tight. So here's a nice little tip. Test your zip ties. Once they're tight, if you can spin them, it's not tight. So here's a nice little tip. You are never going to be stronger than these guys right here. It is never going to happen. All right, so you want to pull it generally as tight as you can with your hand, and then you want to come in and use leverage as your friend. Choke up tight with the pliers all the way up against the zip tie. You want to turn into, you hear the click? That's 1 click. And then we're going to do another click. I only usually do 2. There it goes, 2. Now you see the dimple? I mean, probably get another one actually. Let's see if we can get another one in there. A little bit more of a dimple. Oh, there we go. All right. Now it won't spin. That's always test your zip ties. Make sure they're not spinning on you. Make sure you got a nice tight seat. Do it right, because failure sucks. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and start putting this in. We've got the bracket on here, got the orientation set, all of the zip ties are tight, and we're gonna go ahead and start feeding these in. So the coolant lines here, we're gonna go ahead and feed them underneath this harness here so that they get a nice fitment, as well as the lower here. And then we're going to bring this into the position where it would be living and just kind of hold it here free floating. This comes over here. We'll just set that there for now, and then we'll straighten out some hoses, make sure everything is ran accordingly. Now you're going to want to make sure you run these over the fuel rail, not the actual frame rail, over, so a more clean fitment, because this is where you're going to tap in. We're going to pull up the coolant line, tap it in off of the turbo. That's the next step after we get this all mounted and plumbed in. But first, we're going to go ahead and plug up the PCV. I'm going to 90 that down. We're going to bolt this bracket right back to the bell housing, and then we're just going to plug in the PCV hose here into the 90, which they've already provided in the kit. Everything's all ready to go. We've already explained the entire step up to this process. So once we get those all buttoned up, I can grab the two 10 millimeters that they provide in the kit and fashion this right to the side of the strut tower. Shouldn't be that bad. And then literally it's a lot easier to put this side hose on here. Now imagine this was stationary and we had to do that lower hose and still have to tighten that clip, or excuse me, tighten up that zip tie. It'd be pretty difficult. So that's why I'm explaining it in this fashion. Saves you a lot of time.
Okay, so everything is all mounted right to the side of the tower. Everything has been oriented and plugged into place. The bracket is back on, both bolts. It's plugged into the PCV port onto the top of the crankcase, and everything has been plugged in. And as you can see, the orientation. Now we've just got that one last hose right here on the last of the 3 ports here, and that is going to be the extension hose, which is here. That's got your 90, which is already a pre-made piece also as well. And that will go right there on the 3rd port there. So we'll go ahead and we'll put that on, and we'll fish it through and show you that, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so with that line already put on now, got everything all tightened up, zip tied and checked. Now we can go ahead and start moving to the last 2, which is the top of the breather. This is the last section to put on, which is your Y section. You see how it's a really long Y and it transitions down. We're going to grab that, and then we're going to slip that onto the top of these 2 breathers. Boom, boom. Same fashion, and then this snakes down to be plugged in. So we're going to go ahead and get all these hoses ran, and then we're going to show you the orientation, how to plug these in real quick and be done with this setup. So we can just go straight to assembly. Yep. All right, so Tyler went ahead and fit that right on there. He's going to go ahead and zip tie it. And again, you want to make sure that you put this underneath this harness here so everything fits nice and cleanly right above the fuel rails. So you've got all the lines will run right here in this general area. Now there is an extra computer because this WRX is an automatic. So if you're wondering why that's there and not in yours, that's the reason why. It's still going to be the same orientation. Oh, I heard it. You guys remember down here on the inlet area where we had to disconnect the locking clamp on there, and then we had to push the plastic plug back on. Now it's time to come back to this. All right, so now we can take this and we snake it underneath all the lines that we just ran. Again, everything over the fuel rail area. And then we're going to snake it behind here on the back side of the engine, where this just so happens, you know, this is the hose that we just installed on the bottom of the 3-port. We just did that one. We're going to go ahead and plug that right in. Okay. All right. And then so now that will naturally sit right here. And what they want you to do is zip tie this stationary so it's not moving. Okay, so before you actually zip tie that into place, now it's time to put that EGR back.
All right, so that EGR pipe that we took out, you guys remember earlier? We're gonna go ahead and put that back in place because we took it out of place so that we had the room for all of this new plumbing. So that's what Tyler's gonna do now, is he's getting ready to start putting that back into place. And then we can start moving on to the next step.
Don't forget your gasket, kids.
All right, so you wanna make sure you put that gasket back into place. You see his little trick how he did that? He did the top one so it goes in so you don't miss the placement. And you just let it fall down and then you can just push it right into place and feed it right in. You don't have to worry about dropping so much stuff.
All right, so now that that EGR pipe is in, now we're gonna go ahead and move over to connecting this coolant line here and the top coolant line as well. Now we're going to transfer over this coolant line right here. So we're going to go ahead and pinch that one. And again, the one that I showed on the back side here. And again, you're going to have to move this one. And you move that one out of the way. And then we're going to pinch that lower one that's down there. And then we're going to go ahead and remove it. We'll pull the spring clamp off. We'll slide this hose up and around and just plug it right into here. Once that gets plugged in, that'll get zip tied right on there. We'll make sure that's all tight. And then the hose that's already here, which they come with the spring clamp. Remember, you got to get your spring clamp on there. This is your upper hose. Okay, so I've got it fed underneath everything, nice and oriented. Because remember, we still got to fit the charge pipe in here. So everything's all down by the fuel rails. So we're going to grab that top line. And then after we take that off, we're just going to shove it right on with the new spring clamp. Okay, so I went ahead and I've clamped the line. The line has been clamped. Backside as well. So now we can actually take this spring clamp here, unloosen that, and then pull this line off. Move it into place. Plug it right in. All right, now the action has been done. That top line for the AOS, top line, feeds down right to the turbo. Put the spring clamp on that they give in the kit. And then the hose then feeds right up and over, which is here. And then plugs into the lower hose, lower coolant hose of the AOS. And then your spring clamp, we'll get some pliers and we'll slide the spring clamp right on over. All right, and with the spring clamp on there, now it's time for the next action, and that is to place the top mount intercooler back on. So we're going to go ahead and start putting it back in its placement so that we can then run the charge pipe all the way through here and then down to the turbo assembly. We're just going to move all this stuff out of the way. You know, notice that we are not zip tying any of these lines into any kind of stationary positions, only because we want to dry fit and get everything into place, and then we can start zip tying everything where it needs to be, so it's not moving on you. So for now, we're going to go ahead and place that charge pipe in there, but before we can do so, we'll put that top mount on. Okay, and if you have removed the intercooler bracket like we did to get it out of the way, you just want to make sure that you put that right back on and then get that back tightened into position. And then we can go ahead and start placing the top mount into place. Now don't worry, we already know that there are still, some hoses that are left unhooked. Obviously this breather tube and whatnot, that's the reason why you're having to do the charge pipe now. Because remember, we unhooked the blow-off valve that sits behind this breather hose. So we have to put that all back together now before we can slip that hose back on. Because if you do that action now, it's just going to be in the way of that spring clamp. Okay, so then over on the other side, you're just going to slide in the other top mount intercooler bracket. It just feeds underneath that one. He's tightening that bolt into the bracket itself.
and then the two 12 millimeters that go right into the top of the intake manifold. Basically now it's just putting everything all back together now. We're almost done with this project. So if you're at this point in time, be relieved that the job is almost over. So now it's the charge pipe installation. We're gonna go ahead and fit that in there first beforehand. We're gonna have to make some room for it. So what you're gonna wanna do is on the back side here where you've got your ABCS solenoid and your plug, you want to be able to get past that. You don't want to have any obstruction sitting on top of that because these hoses naturally are going to want to fall on that. So again, you just want to snake them down in a nice clean fashion. So all this runs in this area and it gives us a nice allotted space to put the charge pipe back in. Now, just like you took it out, you're going to have to reverse fashion. It came out blow off valve last, so that's how you're going to have to put it back in. Put it in its general vicinity where it needs to be, and then you can start snaking it in the area that it needs to go. So we'll go ahead and start putting this right back into place. Make sure we clear that sensor. And then again, remember there is a rubber gasket on here. Make sure the rubber gasket stays on there. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and get on the bottom of the car, and I'm going to push the blow-off valve back into the intake section. Get that back in there to its spring clamp, and it should be ready to go. All right, so the charge pipe has been fit in there. It's in the general orientation. We've got it pushed on as far as we can go, and now we're just going to climb underneath. Okay, so as you can see, this is a lot easier. There's everything. All right, so we're going to pop the blow-off valve into the inlet boot, push that down in, and then we will tighten. Let me get this clamp out of your way. Tighten that spring clamp right there. So we're going to get some pliers. We will unloosen that. We'll slide the blow-off valve in, tighten that up, and then we can start plugging in this hose here, which is the blow-off valve vent tube. You know, might as well just do that now. Okay, so now that we've gotten everything buttoned up down there now it is time to do the last remaining section, which is that top breather, this big Y section. So this long hose will now feed down, and we'll be able to connect that on there, zip tie it into place, and we'll be ready Freddy. But before you want to put that last hose on, we actually want to get in there and start putting in the last two 12 millimeter studs that will connect this charge pipe to the actual turbo itself. And then mechanically sound will be basically done with the assembly wise. Also, another tip, remember everything labeled in bags. So you can come back to this, grab that charge pipe, take the two pieces out that you need, the two bolts, and then run right down into the fashion that he's doing now. Put them right in. Pretty easy. In case you're wondering what he's working with right now, this is a magnet. It's got claws on it, so the claws can actually grab the bolt head itself. And then, yeah, actually, you want to show him real quick how this thing works?
Yeah.
Here, grab that. So it's got some claws on it. Extend out. You know, for that long reach, you can't get to it, and obviously bolts will not stay inside of a socket. They fall right out. You know, you can't get your fingers in there. That's a pretty nice little tool. And you can just basically push it down into the area you need and just start threading in. It's pretty nice to have. Nice little tip. All right, so the last step, we'll push that right on there, and then we'll go ahead and put the zip tie on. Okay, so now that it's been placed on, go ahead and place your zip tie into its desired area. Make sure it is going to get a good bite into the plastic part as well and have a good seat. And then of course, test your zip tie. Make sure it doesn't spin. Make sure it has a good seat and it puts a good dimple into the hose. And then you can snip it, clip it away. Everything's good to go. You know, as you can see, it still spins. You know, it was tight until he tested it. Always test your zip ties.
Okay, so now we'll go ahead and throw that fan in. I went ahead and placed a couple zip ties into place. That way they are stationary. You don't have to worry about the hose moving at all. And now it's time to just start putting some parts back in place. All right, so with that buttoned up, now Tyler is going ahead, and with the next step, he's just putting back on that little aluminum H-brace that we took off earlier. That's just the 4 12-millimeter bolts. Pretty simple. You know, basically, we're basically home stretch. You know, we're almost done. And then we can put on that plastic plate on the bottom. The plastic protection plate sits right on the bottom. Pretty easy. And then the air box is the next thing to be put on. We'll go ahead and slip that in here, put all the hardware back in, and then we are officially done. Okay, everything has been buttoned up and basically in place. We've got all of the protective covers back on. And now it's time to actually just put the battery back in, take it off its jack stands, and start this car. All right, all lowered down off of the jack stands, putting the license plate bracket back on. We basically took that off, guys, just so we weren't kicking it with our shins while we were working on this process. Just makes things a lot easier. And then, of course, you want to be able to cover all of your fender tops because you are going to be leaning over the engine bay, you know, quite a bit. You don't want to scratch anything. If you got keys in your pocket, remove the keys, take the knife out of your pocket, make sure you're not scratching paint, etc. Also, another tip when you pull the battery and get that out, what I tend to do is put it right on the battery charger. Let the battery tend. That way, when I put this back in here, I know that that battery is back to 100% again. One thing about these cars is they are driving computers. If you do not have proper voltage, they do not run the correct manner. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and end this upload here. I hope you guys enjoyed. But before we can do that, obviously you're probably going to want to hear the first startup of this. So we'll go ahead and start her up. And she's got nameless muffler deletes on it, so she's a little loud. She's got some burble. All right, so we'll go around. All right, well, now it's outside. We're letting it warm up completely to temp. You want to be able to test everything. Make sure you're not having any issues. No leaking, no overheating, nothing. And as you can see, she's cold right now. So we're gonna let her warm up, and then we're gonna check for any drips, any leaks. And if they are there, we're gonna go ahead and address them before anybody picks the vehicle up. Make sure you take the time and do it the right way, or don't do it at all. That's just the way I convey things as much as I can, especially in this shop. So if it's not done right, probably not going to touch it. So with that said, I'm Bill Schneider. This is Rumble Garage. I work on only cars with the stars, Subaru only. Hope you guys enjoyed the upload. If you did, drop a like down below. Hit that subscribe button if you guys are looking to find out when the uploads are coming up. Hit that bell. That way it gives you a notification of every single time Rumble Garage does an upload. So with that said, have a great day. And if you're still staying tuned, I actually should tell you guys real quick, in the kit, you're going to see this hose here. If you're wondering what this hose is because it's left over, this is for the 15 and 16 models, the 2015, 2016 models. So this is not needed for the 2017 to 2020 models. So if that's left over and you guys are kind of scratching your head, that's it. Pretty easy. Have a good day. And also, where's my sticker? How come no parts come with stickers? Where's my sticker? I want my sticker.